reporting tonight is one of the most dramatic and rapid frontline collapses Russia has suffered in this conflict. Not a withdrawal over weeks or days, but a structural failure measured in hours. In the Avdiivka sector, an area of fiercely symbolic and heavily fortified importance, Russian defensive lines, long described as impregnable, have disintegrated. Ukraine, seizing the moment with decisive speed, achieved a breakthrough for which Russian forces were demonstrably unprepared. This is the kind of fundamental shift that is rare in a war of entrenched positions. Russia invested profoundly in this objective. Vast manpower, artillery, armoured vehicles, and months of costly assaults. It was treated as a political imperative, not merely a military one. That context makes today's events particularly significant. Ukraine did not merely repel an attack, it shattered Russia's defensive line. Ukrainian forces are now operating in zones Russia vowed to hold indefinitely, moving through trenches deemed unbreachable and securing bunkers declared inviolable. The visual evidence is compelling. Drone footage reveals abandoned Russian trench lines, not as part of a coordinated rotation, but due to a sudden abandonment of position. Equipment, supplies, and personal effects have been left behind. This was not a tactical retreat. This was a collapse. To understand the velocity of this failure, we must examine the last 24 hours. Ukrainian operations began with precision, not scale. A targeted assault employing drones, artillery, and focused infantry groups probed for weaknesses, and they found them. Intelligence indicated a critical vulnerability, low Russian morale, depleted supplies, and a breakdown in unit communications. Intercepted transmissions tell a clear story. Soldiers complaining of absent artillery support, silent drones, and unresponsive command. One soldier stated, "We can't hold. They are coming from everywhere. We have no shells." Another reported, "The left side ran, the right side ran. We are alone." At that moment of acute vulnerability, Ukraine struck the centre of that weakness. Fast-moving assault groups, supported by drones and armour, overran trenches in minutes. The Russian response was one of stunned disarray, immediate surrenders, uncontrolled flight, dissolution. Then came the contagion of panic. Adjacent Russian units, witnessing the collapse beside them, began to fracture. Reports of encirclement, a loss of communications, and a complete absence of coherent orders created a cascade effect. The retreat became a rout, too deep, too fast, and critically disorganised. This created a consequential gap in the front line, which Ukrainian forces exploited without hesitation. Documented footage shows infantry advancing across open ground, securing abandoned fortifications and supply points, and raising flags over positions held by Russia for months. The pace and scale of this advance mark a decisive moment in this phase of the conflict. What we are observing is a phenomenon uncommon in a war defined by static, heavily fortified positions, a near-total collapse of a defensive front in a matter of hours. The Avdiivka sector was uniquely primed for this outcome. Months of brutal combat had effectively degraded Russian forces, not just in terms of manpower and material, but more critically, in command cohesion and unit morale. The structure was, in essence, brittle. Ukraine's precise, well-timed offensive did not merely attack this structure, it shattered it. Our analysis, informed by defence and intelligence sources, points to several systemic failures. The primary catalyst was the comprehensive breakdown of Russian battlefield communications. Ukrainian electronic warfare units successfully targeted command networks, jamming radios and blinding drone operators. The result was a force rendered deaf and blind at the precise moment of crisis. Without communication, there could be no coordinated artillery support, no organised reinforcement, and no situational awareness. In such a vacuum, uncertainty breeds fear, fear triggers panic, and panic dissolves discipline. Compounding this was a critical shortage of ammunition. Reports from the front indicate Russian units had been rationing mortar and small arms rounds for some time. When faced with a concentrated Ukrainian assault, their ability to mount an effective defence was severely degraded by a simple lack of firepower. Furthermore, the expected Russian reinforcements failed to materialise. Units were either obstructed by interdicted supply lines or, we understand, showed a marked reluctance to advance into what was perceived as a collapsing sector, command authority visibly fractured. We have reports of contradictory orders issued in rapid succession, instructions to hold positions, then to retreat, then to await support, culminating in a telling radio silence. This silence signifies the failure of the command chain itself. In contrast, Ukrainian forces executed a disciplined and systematic exploitation of the resulting chaos. Reconnaissance drones tracked fleeing personnel, precision artillery struck evacuation routes, and infantry and armour secured key terrain to prevent any Russian reconsolidation. This was not merely an advance, it was the deliberate dismantling of an opponent's combat effectiveness. The evidence on the ground is unequivocal. Ukrainian troops now control extensive trench networks, command posts, and logistical nodes. One telling piece of footage shows a captured bunker with operational equipment and intact tactical maps left on the walls, indicative of a precipitous, disordered withdrawal. Perhaps the most symbolic image is that of a Russian drone abandoned in mid-flight, drifting until its battery died. It is a perfect metaphor for the sudden, complete loss of control that defines a rapid military collapse. Turning now to the political and strategic ramifications, the immediate consequence within Russia has been a swift and furious allocation of blame. Influential pro-war bloggers, a key constituency for the Kremlin, are not merely criticising, they are in open revolt. Their narratives have shifted from cheerleading to accusations of profound command incompetence, demands for official inquiries, and stark warnings that the collapse could become contagious, spreading to adjacent sectors. One termed it a disaster, noting the front broke in hours. Another declared, the army is exhausted, highlighting a force being outpaced by events. Even state media's formidable spin apparatus is struggling. Anchors speak of repositioning and tactical withdrawal, but their narrative is undermined by the raw evidence circulating on Telegram, footage of abandoned positions and disordered retreats. Our understanding is that within the Kremlin, President Putin has demanded explanations. The response has been a cascade of buck passing. Generals cite logistical failures, commanders blame absent reinforcements, and political officials point the finger at field officers. It is a classic portrait of a system where accountability is diffused and responsibility is shirked. Analysts, however, offer a clear-eyed assessment. The collapse stems from a military stretched beyond its capacity. Exhausted troops, depleted supplies, broken morale, and a command structure that fractured under precise Ukrainian pressure. In contrast, Ukraine's execution was a model of disciplined, skilled warfare. The immediate Ukrainian objective appears calibrated. Commanders are consolidating gains and probing Russian fallback lines, not necessarily for vast new territory, but to exploit confusion, maintain pressure, and force Russia to expend its strategic reserves merely to stabilise the situation. This is where the true lasting damage may lie. The loss of territory is one thing. The erosion of intangible assets is another. The psychological shock, the logistical disarray, the paralysis in the chain of command, these create a ripple effect across the entire theatre. We are already receiving reports of heightened anxiety in neighbouring Russian units who now fear being the next target, leading to urgent requests for supplies and ad hoc defensive preparations. This is how confidence, cohesion, and the very belief in a held line disintegrate. Conversely, Ukrainian morale has received a powerful, palpable boost. The psychological currency gained here is as significant as the ground. In summary, the landscape of this conflict has been materially altered in the last 48 hours. What occurred was not a symbolic setback, but a structural failure in a critical sector of the Russian war effort. And Ukraine has demonstrated, with notable precision and resilience, a decisive capacity to exploit such a failure. The consequences will continue to unfold in the days ahead.